Ben McAdams, Mayor of Salt Lake County and now Congressman-elect from the great state of Utah. Thank you so much for being part of Three Questions.
Yeah, thank you, Bob.
How relieved are you that this election is finally over?
It was a long and drawn-out election night that went almost 3 weeks, and ups and downs, but was happy to have the results finally called and really ready to move on and start serving the people of Utah and start, reaching out and starting to build bridges.
It was a very, very close race. I mean, I don't know of another race that has been closer than that in the state of Utah in recent years. Did you ever have, at any time during the vote counting, any indication where this thing would ultimately end up?
I think myself and pretty much everybody I know had a spreadsheet that they were running calculations or hitting refresh or watching the news for results, and a lot of people were engaged with it. And there were times where we thought, okay, these results look good and it's looking really good for us, and then other days that numbers would come in and it looked bad, and it really was a roller coaster. There was a weekend there where we had a series of results that weren't in my favor, and I thought, okay, so probably at this point it's heading toward a loss. My wife and I actually sat down and started making a list with our kids, mentally preparing to lose and saying, okay, it's going to be okay, and here's the things that we can look forward to if I lose the election. And it was, finally getting a vacation that's been long overdue, and some things that I'm working on as mayor that I'd love to continue working on. We came up with a pretty good list, and then the numbers turned around and I won.
Why do you think the campaign turned so negative?
I think campaigns are about differences, right? I think that's what's intended in a democracy, is a competition of ideas, and campaigns are about my position and my opponent's position, and that's inherent in the nature of a campaign. Now, I think governing's a lot different. Governing's about what you and I have in common and where we can find common ground. This campaign, I think, though, was disappointingly was a little extra negative, and that took a toll on me and on my wife and my kids, and I know that it did on my opponent as well. You had because it was nationally a very competitive race, you had a lot of super PACs nationally that were coming in. I think on both sides they were overly negative, and just really took it to a place that neither I nor my opponent really wanted to see it go.
Because this last campaign and the election was so negative, how does Utah recover from that? Because now you've got the super PACs who will come in and they'll do that kind of thing whether you want them to or not. How do we recover from that, and how do we keep it from happening again?
I think how we recover from that is as a public official, I've always been a very positive, optimistic person. My track record as mayor, my previous campaigns when I've run for mayor have always been positive and upbeat. That's who I'm going to be, and hope that that's how future campaigns are. That the super PACs don't come in with that same negative message. That we can keep it on, my accomplishments, my vision for the district. An opponent, somebody will run against me, and should criticize me for maybe where I've made poor decisions, and then we let the voters ultimately decide. And I think, as long as it's about what I want to do, what my opponent wants to do, and keep it in that policy nature, that's what elections are about. And I'm ready for that, and willing to be scrutinized in that way. The voters deserve, being able to scrutinize your public officials. So that's all I think to be expected, and I hope we can keep it in that sphere in the future.
What did outgoing Congresswoman Mia Love say to you in her phone call prior to your accepting the win?
She congratulated me on the win, and then many of the things that you heard her say in that press conference afterwards, she said to me in the phone call as well, that and she was upset about the loss, and so we talked a little bit about that, and I tried to put myself in her shoes. I talked about that. There was a period of a few days where it looked like I was going to lose, and so I was mentally preparing to call her, to offer her my congratulations and what I might say. And that's a hard thing as an individual. Sometimes politicians, elected officials, we see them on the TV and you don't really think of them as people. And I can say, I'm a real person, and I went through that exercise of preparing to talk to her, and on a personal level, it's a tough thing to do. I knew that it was the right thing to do and I would have to do that, but I know that it was tough. And then the tables turned and I won the election. So I tried to be really empathetic to her, to understand that the call that we were having was hard for her. and to give her the space to be upset, to be, to be disappointed with the outcome of the election, and yet I talked to her about a desire to move forward, that we could have a positive relationship for the people of Utah and work together for the people of Utah.
In her news conference after that telephone call, she called you a wolf in sheep's clothing. Did she call you that on the phone?
She didn't use those words on the phone per se, but I was disappointed to hear that rhetoric. I'm somebody who I try to serve and do the best for the people of Utah. I've made mistakes, but I'm sincere and authentic, and I want to serve, and I love this state, and I love this country, and I want to serve and give my best. So I was disappointed at the name calling, but I certainly, again, can understand that she was having a hard time with the results of the election, and I'm ready to move forward.
Since this is fresh in the news right now, I'm going to ask this question. When President Bush 41 left office, it was a very hard-fought campaign with Bill Clinton. And yet now here in his passing, we have heard the letter that he left President Clinton in the Oval Office on the desk there for him to read when he came in. And it was full of grace and support and good wishes and all of that kind of thing. Are we losing that feeling in politics now?
I hope we're not losing that feeling. I think that that's what makes this country great, is that transition of power from, a tough and vigorous campaign. That presidential campaign between George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton, it's probably one of the first campaigns I remember. I was in high school at the time, and that was a vigorous campaign, and that was hard-fought campaign, and from my memory of that, to think that President Bush, a couple months later, sat down and wrote that letter to somebody who had beat him in a tough election, makes him all the more a hero in my mind. I think there are still good people in politics. There are a lot of good people who are serving for the right reasons, and I know many of them. I often think about the friendship that I've developed with Speaker Greg Hughes, who's a conservative Republican, and he and I have developed a strong friendship such that we talk on the phone on a frequent basis. Sometimes it's to hash things out and argue. I think constructively we argue, but we hash things out. Sometimes we are critical of each other in the press, but never critical of each other at a personal level. I think he's serving because he cares, and I think he believes the same about me, and ultimately we can find common ground. So I think there are good people out there, and it's my hope, as I go back to Washington right now, I think Washington is broken, that I can be part of healing and finding those people on both sides of the aisle in Washington, and then working with them to do good in this country.
You've been through freshman orientation for Congress already. You're back now. Is it going about the way you expected it would go, or are you being surprised along the way?
So far orientation has been fairly mundane. It's just pretty much like onboarding at any job that you go through. So it's, here's, we need your Social Security number to cut you a paycheck. We need a canceled check so we can do a direct deposit, and selecting your office, and here's what you need to think about when you're hiring staff. So it's all the mundane stuff of coming onto a job so far. There's the part that I've really enjoyed, though, is getting to know my fellow elected officials, the people who have come into office right now, who are also going through orientation. And I've gotten to know people from both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, who are really some inspiring people who I think are serving for the same reason I am. They love this country. They want to do good for this country. And they may be bringing different perspectives to the table, from some to the far left, to some on the far right, to others like myself in the middle, who just are interested in serving. And so I've been inspired to see those people also going through orientation. I really look forward to building those relationships as we try to serve this country.
During the campaign, you made a big deal to say that you are not going to vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. Why not?
Well, and it's a great question. I get that question a lot these days. First of all, I just think new ideas and new faces are good for this country. They're good for public service. It's the same reason that I think term limits are a good thing. It's just good to have that turnover and new people coming in. She's been the leader of the Democrats in Congress for 14 years, and I think turnover is a good thing. And I would say that for both parties. I want to see new leadership from both parties in Washington. Now, Speaker Ryan is retiring from the legislature. The Republicans will have a new leader. I would like to see the same for the Democrats.
Because you are not going to vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House, are you worried that that might diminish your influence and your effectiveness within the Democratic Party itself?
Well, first of all, I would say I think too often people are make a decision based on what's in it for me. Is this going to advance my opportunities or make my opportunities less? I think we got to elect people to Washington who are just going to make the decision that matches with their conscience. What is the right decision to make? And, you know, I made a decision that I think it's time for new leadership. I pledged that to my district. I made a promise that I would vote for new leadership, and I'm going to honor that promise. You know, whether it means I get a worse committee assignment, I don't know. I hope not. You know, I hope that, you know, others in Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, can say we've got to be able to disagree from time to time, even on things as important as leadership, and then go on and serve together. I've communicated to my colleagues that say, look, this is the position I've taken, this is the position I believe in and the vote that I will cast, but then I will work with you, Republicans and Democrats, to move forward and I'll still vote my conscience and vote in accordance with what I think my district wants me to do, but I'm gonna work, you know, constructively and move forward after that.
Washington is not known as a tremendously charitable kind of place, at least not when it comes to politics. You not voting for Nancy Pelosi could mean that you wind up in a committee assignment or with no assignment at all, and there wouldn't be anything you could do about it. That's not just about you. That's about the influence that the constituents in your district will have in Congress. Mm-hmm. So is there not a point at which you have to weigh those two and decide, well, maybe I ought to go along to get along or get along to go along?
You know, I mean, certainly there are people in my district that would like to see me vote for Nancy Pelosi, and there are people who would like to see me keep my promise to not vote for her. But I do think that a promise made on the campaign trail, it's a promise, and I'm going to honor that promise. There are numerous committees that I may serve on. I don't think there's a bad committee. You know, it's where you would be interested in serving. As mayor, because as mayor I have such a diverse portfolio, I think there are a lot of places where I could serve and give good service both to the state of Utah and to this country. And so we'll see what decisions are out there, what opportunities are out there to serve. But I think, you know, I feel pretty confident that no matter what committee I'm on, I can serve the people of Utah well and be their voice in Washington.
What kind of effect will your election now have on your young family?
You know, I think, again, coming back to the personal, I think that it's going to take a toll on my family. We're a close family. We support each other for everything from my kids walk in parades with me, and my wife supports us in the parades, to, you know, cheering my kids in their baseball games and soccer games. So we're a close family. This is going to be a new chapter in our family life, that I will be commuting back and forth to Washington, spending a few days each week representing Utah and Washington. I hope to be home on the weekends to be with my family and also be with my constituents, so they'll have a chance to connect with me and I can stay in touch with them. So I think it'll be a new chapter in our family. It'll take some adjustment, but we've discussed it as a family. We're all in this together, and we're going to support each other and then find our way with this new work arrangement.
No more school programs, no more Little League games, no more tucking them in and doing homework at night. Are you ready for that?
Well, what we've been talking about just this last weekend is what we can do to stay close as a family. So we're talking about, you know, every evening doing a video call that we can talk, or maybe I can read bedtime stories over the phone. Some baseball games will be on Saturday. I'll miss some of the weeknight games, but I'll see some of the Saturday games. One of the ideas we came up with is maybe every Friday night we could go night skiing or something like that. Some traditions that we can just do as a family to make sure we're spending quality time together.
You say that you'd like to reach across the aisle, work with the Republican Party. You consider yourself a moderate. But anymore in Washington, there are so many polar opposites, and the leadership in the major parties are at such odds with each other all the time. How do you overcome that and really make a difference as a freshman congressman?
You know, I do recognize coming in that I'm one of 435. I will be a junior member of the Congress. You know, they elected 85 new people in this last election cycle. So already that's almost a fourth of the Congress will be people who are new. Many of my colleagues are people who, as we were talking to them in some of the orientation meetings and that, we were saying, we're not here to continue the gridlock. We want to get stuff done. People were talking about the need to put forward an infrastructure package to invest in our roads and bridges and our growing communities and reaching across the aisle to get that done. I think the people who were elected have an appetite to get things done. And hopefully that can be infectious and it can bubble up. I've already had some great conversations with Congressman Curtis here in our Utah delegation about how we might work together on behalf of Utah. So there are good people in Washington. I think Washington's broken, but there are good people there trying to fix it and new people coming in trying to fix it. And look, I'm an optimist. I have hope that we can find ways to move forward and not just be stuck in this gridlock forever.
Once you have moved into your new office, however far down in the basement it may be, once you've moved in and you've gotten oriented to your new digs and how things are done there and the new Congress goes to work, what will be the first thing that you do for your Utah constituents? And be specific.
So, I just got assigned a new office. In fact, I'm in the same hallway with Representative John Curtis and Representative Rob Bishop. So there's going to be Utah Row there. So if anybody's in Washington, come visit us all. We're all going to be right there close.
Wonderful.
The first thing that I want to do is I promised my constituents I would not lose touch with people here in Utah. And I want to make good on that promise by continuing to have an open door just like I have as mayor and holding frequent and regular town hall meetings so I can sit down and listen to them. What do they want me to do? Some of representation is, standing up for what I believe in, but it's also listening to what the people who I represent want me to do and how I can best reflect their interests. And so, one of the first things I want to do is host a series of town hall meetings throughout the district so they can come and tell me what they think.
What do you anticipate will be the #1 issue that you will address once you take office?
Well, there are a few things that I hope to have done. An investment in infrastructure, transportation package, that we've got to come together, Republicans and Democrats, and find a way to invest in crumbling roads and crumbling bridges, in our highways and our transit systems, so that we can have, this is really the backbone of our economy. So an investment in our transportation infrastructure has to happen in the next 2 years. Addressing the rising cost of health care and making sure that people have access to quality health care. And then to address a broken immigration system. We've got to protect our borders. There are dangerous people who want to come into this country and do us harm. But we also have to make sure that those people who are in this country trying to support our economy and support their families, they have a pathway to do so legally and to pay taxes while they do it. That those people who want to come to this country because they have skills that can contribute to our prosperity, that they have a pathway to come here legally. So immigration reform has to happen.
What are your living arrangements going to be in Washington?
Oh, that's what I'm trying to figure out right now. I don't know.
Are you going to sleep on a cot in your office?
I'm hoping to not sleep on a cot. There are actually a lot of members of Congress who apparently do that. I'm hoping to not do that. I'm looking for just a small apartment, 500 square feet, that I can have a bed and a shower, and maybe when my family comes out to visit, we throw down 4 or 5 air mattresses and make it work.
What does your election to Congress mean for the Democrats in Utah?
Hopefully this means that, people can see a style of leadership that is appealing to a broader population in Utah, that really reaching across the aisle, being pragmatic, but also, I'm a fiscal conservative. I believe that government needs to live within its means, that we have to have balanced budgets, and we can't do everything. That this is maybe a pathway for Utah Democrats and other elected officials to move forward to try and build coalitions that can garner the broadest amount of support possible from the voters. But it's supporting education, supporting clean air and the environment, supporting quality health care, but keeping taxes low and living within our means.
One of the things that you have said is that you want to go back and fix the Affordable Care Act. With the Democrats now in power in the House, what are the chances that that's even going to come up?
Oh, I think, in my conversations with people realize that there's a lot is broken with our healthcare system. You know, the Affordable Care Act fixed some important things, protecting people who have pre-existing conditions, expanding access to healthcare. But what we've seen is the costs are rising. And then the costs are rising even more with some of the things that Republicans in Congress have done in the last year. We see costs continue to rise. We have to do something to control the rising cost of healthcare. I have some ideas. You know, I'm only one person, but some of our experiences, my experiences as the mayor of Salt Lake County that we've done to lower healthcare costs for our employees. I think, you know, I hope to bring some good ideas to the table, but it's something we've got to come together and find a way to control the cost of healthcare while continuing to provide access to quality healthcare to people who need it.
In March of 2017, you spent 3 days and 2 nights on the streets of Salt Lake, masquerading as a homeless person. It was a life-altering experience for you. What did you learn from that experience, and how will that affect what you do in Washington?
Well, I had been tasked at that time with making some important decisions about the future of our homeless services system, and knowing that my decision would impact people's lives for decades to come, I wanted to get it right. So I did. I spent 3 days and 2 nights observing the homeless services, using them, checking into services, you know, eating in the soup kitchen and different places. And you know, first of all, I realized that the people around me, they needed solutions, and they needed somebody to find the solutions that would help them get back on their feet, to regain self-reliance and independence. And one of the takeaways for me was no amount of partisanship or disagreement was, they didn't care what party I was or what party somebody else was from. They just, and they didn't even care that I was the mayor. They didn't know I was the mayor. They wanted solutions. And that I felt that I had to deliver solutions to them. And that meant working with people who saw the problem differently than I did and saw solutions differently than I did. But we had to move forward. The other takeaway for me was, you know, we have a system that does a good job of helping people who are in crisis. But I wanted to get upstream and not just help people have a meal and a bed, but help people to overcome whatever was giving them crisis, whether it was addiction, to get them into treatment, or unemployment, let's maybe get them some job training so they can get a job. Domestic violence, we need to maybe get them some counseling, but some short-term investments could actually help people to overcome their crisis and then get back on their feet and provide for themselves.
Did you ever fear for your safety?
Yeah. You know, I think there were fights that broke out, threats that were made.
To you?
Not specifically to me, but a bed away from me, somebody was pulled off their bed, they hit their head on the cement floor, they were bleeding. You know, I think it did feel dangerous. Drugs and drug dealing. You know, I did at one point feel like if somebody knew who I was, that might be a threat to my safety. It was troubling. But you know, I think it was important to see that. And sometimes we don't realize that just a few short miles from where we sleep in our homes at night, that this situation is happening, and it's inexcusable. We have to have a community that's safe for the people who live and shop and work in this community. But we also have to have homeless services who are safe for those people who find themselves in crisis and nowhere else to go. We have to have services that are safe.
As a congressman from Utah, what can you do to help solve the homeless problem here in Utah?
You know, I think there are a lot of things that we've learned at the local level that have application nationally. I would like to, you know, and there are people across this country who have good ideas and things that are working and things that aren't working. Maybe translate some of those things we've learned here locally to help to solve some of the problems more nationally. And some of the things we've learned is we shouldn't tolerate crime and violence in our homeless services, that by going upstream and helping to address the cause of their crisis, we might help them to help themselves ultimately at the end of the day. So more treatment, more options for treatment, more options for job training, but also expecting people who are receiving these services to comply with standards of safety and basic, to follow the law, and we can expect that from them. So I think there's a lot of lessons learned and a lot that I hope to learn from other people, but I hope to take some of this knowledge to Congress and to contribute it back to our country.
In March of 2017, you spent 3 days and 2 nights on the streets of Salt Lake City. How did that affect your mindset in regard to how you think about the homeless?
You know, spending time with them, walking in their shoes, one of the things that I saw is that many of them, they're people. And they're people who have, certainly they have challenges, but they have loved ones who care about them and who they care about. Many of those people have come to know now because we've expanded, working with Speaker Hughes and Lieutenant Governor Cox, we've expanded access to treatment. People are getting treatment. They're getting sober, they're getting jobs, they're getting back on their feet. And many of those people I've come to know since then as they come up to me and they say, if you hadn't arrested me in August of 2017, I may not be alive today. But seeing people turn their lives around, you really recognize the value of a human life as they start giving back to society. And you see the beautiful things that they can contribute to our community as law-abiding, hardworking members of our community. You learn the value of a human life, and that's probably one of the biggest takeaways.
Ben McAdams, Mayor of Salt Lake County and now Congressman-elect from the great state of Utah. Thank you so much for being part of 3 Questions.
Thank you, Bob.